Welcome to Forgotten Books, books in the realm of spirituality, occultism, psychology, and philosophy that have not really gotten their due, at least in my opinion. So today I am going to be talking about two books that radically shifted my relationship with dreaming and with dreams. I have always been a really prolific dreamer. And for a long time, I looked through a whole lot of books that some of them resonated with me and some of them did not. But I never really found my place in those books and those sort of dream dictionaries that are so common that say, if you dream of a bee, it has this assigned meaning. If you dream of a plane, it means this sort of thing. Even when we're going into those dream sort of dictionaries that have a little bit more depth to them, if you dream of a person doing this in a dream, could mean one of these three things. Um, I found that they didn't really ring true to me, or perhaps weren't really at the depth that I needed in order to make sense of or carry over into my own dream life. So, the first book that I'm going to talk about today is the first book that really helped me to make sense of my dreams. And this is Dreams, A Portal to the Source. And it is by Edward Whitmont and Sylvia Perera. In this book, it talks about interpretation of dreams through kind of a classic neo-Jungian context. And what that means is that although it does rely on signs and considerations of where you are, like if you're in the basement, maybe you want to consider something subconscious, versus if you are in the attic, maybe you want to look towards this. But one of the things that this book really taught me was a couple of things. The first is that the attitude or the mood of the dreamer matters a great deal. And so one person may have a dream of being in a basement, and that person may be terrified, and the other person might have a dream of a basement or a bee or whatever symbol we're talking about, wherever they were. And that might mean something entirely different because they felt curious. Um, and so, what the book teaches you is to really examine how you were feeling and how you were doing in that dream, because that can drastically change the interpretation. One person feeling absolutely trapped in said basement and terrified is going to have a different context, a different meaning for that dream ultimately than somebody who is in that same basement and they are, excited to discover new ground. They're wondering what is going on around them with an attitude of, oh, this is interesting. Even though it would be the same symbol, the attitude and the mood and the emotional context for the dreamer is of the utmost importance. And that is really how you frame the dream analysis around, what you frame the dream analysis around. The other thing that I brought up to me was the context of the dream, that our dreams are kind of an amalgamation of, what we've experienced in our lives. Going back to those dream books of symbols, let's talk about kind of the famous plane, plane dreams. Um, Somebody may have a mother that was one of the first female pilots. And so for them, having that context in their life, a plane in their dream may be something that is telling them to break boundaries, to move forward, to look towards their ancestors, to gain strength from their lineage. That would be entirely different context and interpretation than, say, somebody like me who I'm okay on plane rides, but I had a plane ride in which there was a whole lot of turbulence and something like, I don't know, a quarter of the people on board, threw up. And so if I were to have a dream that of being on a plane, that interpretation might be for me of something, warning me about stormy skies ahead, or to watch out for something, depending on and adding to the sort of attitude or mood that I was experiencing. For example, if I was terrified or had a lot of anxiety and was on a plane, I would look towards not only my mood or emotions for context, but also within the context of my greater life. Like, what have planes meant to me in the past? When I think about planes, what do I think of? What does this mean to me on an individual level, rather than kind of a collective consciousness level? And so this book was really, during a period of time, a book that I was really looking for because it gave me that individual context and that framework of emotions that I really was looking for to interpret my dreams in a more in-depth way, in a way that really resonated with me more. So the last turning point for me for dreams and where I'm at now with things, I will introduce James Hillman's The Dream and the Underworld. This book came out in the 70s, and I still think it's worth a read today. James Hillman is actually fairly well known for things like The Soul's Code. That was a later work by him, and he's much more famous for that. I find some of his earlier work to be much more in the field of depth psychology, um, on a simple level, much more in deep and much more for people that are really looking for what I call that ocean floor of meaning. And what I mean by that is people looking for something different and something that creates a catalyst within them. I find that books can have an energy all their own if they are good books. A book in my world can have a soul. It can be sort of an animus being. It can initiate you. It can have energy all of its own. And I find that this book does have some energy, it does have some soul, but really it goes for the second thing that I love about books. The highest compliment that I could give to somebody is that they are a unique thinker. And so books for me, when they introduce a unique thought, a unique perspective, can be a catalyst for my own process. Um, And this book was one of those turning points for me where I read it and I went, oh, that really makes sense. And sometimes it's the time and space in which you pick up a book in which it creates that sort of catalyst for you. Um, and sometimes, you may read a book and it may be too early, or it may be, oh, I should have read this 15 years ago. I have that experience sometimes now quite a bit where either the thought of maybe I'll read this in a couple years, or I should have read this, 15 years ago or something like that. But this book was definitely right time, right space um, for me to find it. So the sort of thesis of this book is that dreams are an aspect of the underworld, and that when we dream, one of the things that I always loved as a child was Greek mythology. And if you go into Greek mythology, what you realize is that sleep and death were brothers in Greek mythology. And if you go further into shamanic work, dreams typically are an aspect of the underworld. If you are working within a shamanic context with somebody, if you are working on their dreams, um, I work as a spiritual practitioner, and so sometimes people will come to me or have come to me and been like, I've had this really disturbing dream, or I just had this dream and it has a great deal, it feels like it has a great deal of meaning for me, but I don't understand it. It would be typically an underworld journey for me, a journey into what we might know as the realms of death, the death realms, to begin to create a bit of meaning or context for that person, or to sort of integrate that energy into their life, basically bring energy back for the person, and so they can begin to process it, and it can come up from the subconscious into the conscious mind, into a distinct message, or something that is processed and healing for them. However, that's just my work. And this book actually caused for me to look at my work differently and my dream life differently, because the thesis of this book is really to keep dreams as part of the other, to keep them as a part of, not to drag them out into daylight, to not, and what I mean by that is to bring them out into the open and dissecting them and looking for meaning. It is just about feeling those dreams, experiencing them as part of the other, experiencing them as a part of us journeying to other realms, us being a part of other realities, and not needing to play detective with them. If some meaning arises, that is wonderful. If it doesn't, though, that is okay. And so this book, The Dream in the Underworld, isn't for people who want to go in and dissect their dreams, or for people who want to go in and to, drag their dreams out into the daylight, to have a particular method for dreaming or creating lucid dreaming, or whatever most of dream work kind of does. This book is for people who want a drastically different perspective on dreaming that is not accepted by the mainstream. And by that, I mean mainstream spirituality. Sometimes you'll have books that have such a unique thought that they are automatically rejected by kind of the spiritual mainstream. And this is what has happened to this book. I do find that in Hillman's later work, I don't want to say dumbed it down a bit, but there is a way to discuss even simple things, even complex things simply. But there is also an aspect of meeting people where they are. And so this gets complicated for writers, because if you want to meet kind of a mass audience, it's not only about that simplicity of language, it is also about meeting people where they are. And if you're going to meet large amounts of people where they are with their consciousness, with their intellect, what happens is that you truly are meeting people at a level that may not be the depth that people beyond a certain point in their spiritual path are looking for. So great for a general audience, great for the author to sell more big books. But if we were talking about the Soul's Code and some of his later works versus The Dream in the Underworld, The Dream in the Underworld is several leaps forward in consciousness. And so I do think at some point, likely, he or maybe his publisher likely realized that he wanted to either sell more books or to specifically gear his work towards an audience that could be met by his work. So that thought aside, what I will say is that The Dream in the Underworld was one of those books that was a catalyst for me. It was not only a catalyst for my dreaming, in which I could maintain with a lot of my dreams an attitude of interest, but not needing to dissect them, not needing to even understand all of them. And what happened with that was that my dream life transformed. Um, I used to get a lot of dreams that really were full of symbols. And, especially when I was working with dreams, a portal to the source, yeah, I did dream about, my aunt's garden a lot, or being in an attic, and, that sort of stuff. Our dreams do kind of meet us where we are in some ways. Um, I don't dream to the same extent I did anymore. What happens with spiritual awakening, for those of you who are familiar with my work, is that those understandings or experiences come more into the daylight, come more into who you are when you're awake. So the symbols and that sort of stuff don't come forward to me like they did. But what has happened is that there's been a dreaming of different planes of existence, a dreaming when I do dream of, that's kind of like watching a movie. Or something similar like that. And so these days I am able to treat them as something that is interesting, but not something that I need to spend a whole lot of time on or need to assign a lot of meaning to. I will also say that although he doesn't spell this out, one of the things that I really took from this book is this attitude of control. What we try to do with the other, with the underworld and concepts of death and the death realms and dreams especially, is to feel like we're in control over them. And this happens in spirituality again and again. If you are truly delving deeply into whatever realm of spirituality you're going into, or even psychology, ultimately what happens is that the work becomes about control, about letting go of control. If you're looking towards works that meet more of the mainstream, they are about illusions of control. They're about illusions of being, Harry Potter, the special one, the chosen one, plucked out of a life of suffering into, great heights, sort of journey or thoughts. When you are willing and able to go deeper into any type of work, but particularly shamanic work, with this work and any work that goes into depth psychology will truly merge with shamanic thoughts, shamanic concepts. What happens when you do start to delve that deeply is that all of those illusions of control start to be shattered. And at first, this can be anxiety inducing because we do love certainty and control. But what happens when we recognize that there are realms much larger than us and we may only explore a fraction of them? What happens when we recognize that there are forces and beings and experiences that are much larger than us that we cannot control and name and claim? Is that a process of healing and greater consciousness occurs. And so this was James Hillman's The Dream in the Underworld was certainly one of those right time, right place for me, because I was looking at the remaining parts of myself that were trying to exert control over some of my spiritual experiences, over kind of the individual self versus feeling in true communion, in true oneness with everything around me. And what happens if you truly let go of that desire to control, those illusions of being in control, those illusions of being in charge of everything spiritually, dreams, or anything else, is that it feels so much better. We have so much anxiety when we try to control the uncontrollable. And if we can let that go, if we can develop trust and faith in the larger spiritual reality, it really can let us evolve and move forward in a way that we never thought possible. So I hope you did enjoy my summaries and my reviews. And let me know what you think, or let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Take care.